Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Thakadu Battery Materials has secured a 50 million rand grant for its pure nickel sulphate plant, while Kropz is finalising its phosphates plant design. Martin Creamer joins me in studio to discuss this development, as well as the need for a larger exploration and junior mining sector in South Africa. Hi Martin.
Morning Tracy.
So Thakadu has received 50 million rand from the Department of Trade and Industry to further its plant in the northwest. What does this plant entail?
This is a plant that makes use of crude material that doesn't fetch a high price and turns it into high-grade, purified, battery-grade material, nickel sulphate, which is in demand at the moment. You know, the word battery is on the lips of everyone. This is a new technology, thinking of how you present energy in the new era. And the opportunity was there to uplift this material, to make it suitable for what is used in the lithium-ion battery space. And Ruli Deseko, a Soweto-born 34-year-old entrepreneur, father of two, he has been working on this for some time. He's already got a trading business, so you know the assets under his control are quite substantial. What he wants to do now is build a 250 million rand nickel sulphate plant, which uplifts this crude material from Lonmin and turns it into material that will be of a grade that can be accepted by the battery industry. And he's already had some of it tested in Asia, in Japan, in Korea, in China. So it seems like there is offtake potential for this. There's demand. And it looks like the internal rate of return will be pretty good at about 47%. But in the meantime, this is an example of the government, through the Department of Trade and Industry, building a new era for black industrialization. And so we have been pleading with the Department of Trade and Industry to give us the names of all of those people whom they've actually granted non-repayable grants to for the promotion of black industrialization. And I'm very pleased to say that although this didn't come from the Department of Trade and Industry, this has come directly, you know, from the company itself, Thakadu. So it's great. I wish the other companies would come forward as well. But from a point of view of South Africa, it would be great if the Department of Trade and Industry became fully transparent in this and gave us a bigger insight. They've given us a whole lot of details, but it's so difficult to go through, and one wants to get a simple way of contacting the people that have gone non-repayable grants. And I think it's a wonderful thing that's happening in this case with Thakadu, because here you've got a potential to earn foreign exchange, because these materials are in demand outside of the country. So you've got a foreign exchange potential, you've got a job creation potential, permanent quality jobs, and also the construction period jobs. And you've got a situation where, you know, this company, if it's going to make a return of 47%, well, that's the internal rate of return, it'll become a tax-paying entity, which means that you actually growing this economic activity. So I think it's very, very positive, and it's adding to the transformation of South Africa. So against that background, I'm delighted to report on this one. I'm very glad the company itself came forward. I wish more of them would come forward. And I would also like the Department of Trade and Industry to respect the fact that we are taxpayers, and they need to tell us, and tell us in a way that doesn't waste our time, which seemingly is what they're trying to do, and give us the details so we can get to these people and get some nice stories like we've got out of this one from Thakadu.
And what is Lonmin's involvement in the project?
Lonmin is playing a fantastic role, and you can see that Ruli Deseko, you know, he's got great admiration for Ben Magara, the CEO of Lonmin, who has worked with this company to make sure that you have a successful outcome. Initially, they said you'd probably see commercialization in the first half of this year, but I think it's more likely the first half of next year that we're going to see commercialization of this plant. There's a lot of advanced design done on it, but I'm sure there's other opportunities, even within Lonmin itself, because we're talking about this material, nickel sulphate, high-grade nickel sulphate, being mixed in with other nickel, cobalt, aluminium sort of potential, along with nickel, manganese, cobalt potential, which means that suddenly the word cobalt jumps out at me, and I get quite concerned about that, because if this cobalt is knocking around, and people tell me it is, if you're mining platinum, there's a potential cobalt stream there. We should be getting it, because this is a national patrimony. It belongs to all the people of South Africa, not just those people doing the mining. They are using a process which seems to destroy that cobalt. I think if that is true, and the hydrometallurgical process saves that cobalt, they're obliged to change their process somehow, because a lot of the speak now is that there is a new process that will be introduced into the Northwest, but there hasn't been much uptake from it, except from Zimbabwe, apparently. Now, if you listen to the cobalt suppliers, they are saying there's going to be such a demand for cobalt that the scientists better get into the laboratory and start looking for an alternative for this in the whole battery mix and electric car mix and all that sort of thing, because there's a potential that we'll run out of it. Now, if we are producing it here, then I think we are obliged to make sure we do that, and maybe that can be the next stream that could set another black entrepreneur going and create this black industrialization which we're looking for.
And then another plant that is being potentially developed in South Africa is Kropz phosphates plant in Elandsfontein. What does this project entail?
Yeah, this in the Western Cape on the West Coast. I think it's got a fantastic narrative. You've got Ian Hairbottle, who we knew from the Gemfields days, and he always used to say he wants to be the beers of coloured gemstones. So he wanted to really elevate them. Now that he's the CEO designate, and I think it'll become official in March, of Kropz, this really food nutrient type business, very different, more essential. He's saying that if you want to get my vision quickly, I want to be the Glencore of the nutrient material, the nutrient mineral business. So you can see his vision is pretty big, which is I think a good thing to have a good strong vision. But it comes with a support base from the fertilizer industry, which is saying the world in the next 50 years is going to have to produce more food than it's produced in the last 10,000 years. Now, it might sound like a hyperbole, but I think the message they're getting across is, hey guys, we've got to move on food because we've got less land to do it on. And so we have to then get a crop yield out of the less land. And how do you get a crop yield out of the smaller space? You've got to use fertilizers and phosphates. So this could be a fantastic business. Now, why are the prices so bad? Well, what has happened is there's been such a little bit of investment in processing, of these nutrient products. And so the rock that has been mined is lying there, and there's an abundance of it, so of course the price drops. Because there's no processing plants, there's too few processing plants to put it through. Kropz is remedying this. It's already spent like nearly $1 billion on putting 95% of its plant up. But of course it hit the drought in the Western Cape, and there was some angst that was expressed about its use of water. So it's had to be very careful how it's gone about this, and it seems to be getting the nod, to go ahead. And so they wanted to design their plant a little bit more robustly and make sure that they get the best out of it. So they see this Elandsfontein plant, and it's not Elandsfontein down the road here that we know on the East Rand. This is Elandsfontein in the Western Cape. And the partner in all this is Patrice Motsepa's African Rainbow Capital, his new investment bank. They've got 25% of the Elandsfontein project. But they, as Kropz, see this Elandsfontein as a start. They want to really take a look around Africa, particularly in the world, see which assets are stressed because of this low price, and see whether they can't expand their business that way and talk to a lot of people. South Africa is used to Phosco, producing, which is controlled by the Industrial Development Corporation, which is state-owned. We've never seen the private sector dive into this with the sort of vision that they're now expressing. So hopefully this will be good for South Africa, because we see that we want to also promote agriculture here, particularly among black entrepreneur agriculturalists. And we also want to help the small-scale farmer. Now, you know, these nutrients that they've been working on, Kropz has dug some into ground, and they grew some aubergines. I think my mom used to call them brinjals, but Americans call them eggplant. But the nutrient worked such a miracle on these aubergines that they're almost as big as the babies of the guy planting them. So you can see that nutrients can work wonders for food production, particularly in the case of small farmers, and we're trying to promote that at the moment. If you go through Africa, you see a lot of subsistence farming, and hardly any fertilizer used, which is very bad. I think it's less fertilizer than anywhere else in the world that's used in Africa. So they've got a strong story to tell. Their storyline is strong. Obviously, they're going to have to persuade the funders, because they've been to funders, and the investment bankers, you know, their eyes just glaze, because they don't want to invest in this sort of thing. They're not used to it. But I suppose they're going to have to be persuaded that it's so essential. You know, you can't get phosphorus from anything else. So the phosphorus can't be recycled either. So it's got to be mined. And so I think there's a big potential for this, but at the moment the penny's still got to drop, particularly with the investing community, to see that they see it as a proposition.
And talking about potential, Dr. John Bristow has come out and said that South Africa is not living up to its potential because we have so few exploration and junior miners in the country. Why is he saying this?
This is an emphasis that he's putting on junior mining. Now, if we look at South Africa's history, it's all on big mines. You know, we've had this big Witwatersrand, we've had the big Bushveld complex for platinum, and engineers have had more say than geologists. You haven't had much activity in the smaller development, and the investors don't want to look at it because they big institutions on investing on the stock exchange. They want to invest in the big companies. The little companies don't interest them in South Africa, and that's got to change, because, you know, if you go to Australia, they are keen on investing in these smaller mining enterprises, and we've got to develop that culture here. The Australians have got that culture. They put their money behind these fellas who give them a wonderful sort of picture of what could happen, and a lot of it's in Africa. Canada, the same. So there are like 600 of these companies listed in Australia. You know, our stock exchange, we've got 22 mining companies if we're lucky, and no little ones. You know, Canada's got like 230 of them. So he's trying to say this must be the new emphasis, because again, this is where you can transform. This is where you can bring black entrepreneurs in to these mines. You can transform through ownership, proper ownership, not just being passengers in a portfolio plane. And he's saying that we should do this because we've still got a jewel box here. We've got a geological jewel box. And I've just been walking around the other day, and I saw that with the winds of change in South Africa, there's certain better things happening on the exploration front. And if some of it comes through, I think it's going to surprise South Africa, because they are finding potential in a lot of areas through new technology. And this could spark a lot of investment in exploration and in hopefully mines, which should resuscitate everything. And perhaps the Chamber of Mines itself has got to start thinking differently, because they concentrate on the bigger mine. They are really trying to help those who've already got a big hole in the ground and make sure the regulatory framework is okay for them, not looking at the potential for greenfield investment in exploration. Dr. John Bristow is saying, let's do it. And what about, you know, getting the National Geographical Geological Survey? They must look inward again. They are state-owned statutory body. They look outward into Africa. They must swing inward, do some mapping here, proper mapping with new technology. Mintech must start doing a proper job to show the people how to process smaller guys, get involved. So those two state organizations, which belong to you and me and the people of South Africa, they must do their job properly. And at the same time, the investor community must start looking at the possibility of how they can get behind these smaller enterprises that come on the stock exchange that need that money to drill, they've got examples to follow in Canada. You know, the flow-through scheme in Canada, why not adopt that? We were on the point of adopting it. Perhaps our Section 12J of the Income Tax Act, maybe it'll be very good. Let's see. Someone must pronounce on it quickly. But you need some sort of incentive like that, because if you go to Canada, you see all those big buildings. It's all around this mining investment. And when you talk to the taxi driver, he's already invested in an exploration activity in Africa somewhere, because he knows that at the end of the year, he will get a tax break on that. So that is the sort of way to stimulate this, get the small people involved as well, not just the big provident funds and investors who have got to be more cautious. That's what Dr. John Bristow is saying. There's a potential, it's in the ground. We could have at least 10 mid-tier mines out of this, I think more, when I start hearing what's going on, in a lot of different minerals and metals, some of them precious. And come on, let's focus the mind. If we want to transform the mining industry, this is a wonderful way to do it.
And where are some of the areas in South Africa that he proposes exploration be focused?
You know, he's very diamond orientated, so he sees a lot in the diamond business. But, you know, there are a multiplicity of different things that you could go for, and it will depend on what the the geographical survey also throws up. But look at what is happening down in the Priska area now. You know, they're resurveying that area, and they're doing it at a time, and it's all private sector funded, mainly from Australia. You know, finding out how much zinc is there. Well, now we know the zinc price is fantastic. Finding out how much copper is there. We know it's a rich area. Now there are many things like that, but diamonds, particularly from John Bristow's side, you know, he feels huge potential. So one would think of you know, the Northern Cape, etc. But I think that it is where you find it, and if the geological survey could help, it would give a lot of impetus to this. It involves a lot of work, there's a lot of risk, you know, and that's what the Australians particularly are used to. They're used to taking these risks. They've also got a lot of geological graduates coming through. We don't have the same number, and you've got to have that mentality. But if we can start focusing the mind around it, perhaps we can get people involved here that will create not only wealth, but it also helps that foreign exchange coming in as you're exporting this material. We've got a lot of logistics. We've also got a lot of infrastructure which takes us to the areas where we need to go. So we're in a good position from a potential greenfield exploration position, and we should make sure we take full advantage.
Thanks, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Tracy.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on the South African mining industry.